Hello, everyone. It's time for another episode of Let's Get Real with Mindset and Money with Michelle DeKeyser and Cheyenne Syverson. Michelle has Connecting Mamas, and I have Inspiring Solutions for You. And we're going to have a hot topic about how to stop that decision fatigue and how to make your life a little bit easier. Michelle, why don't you kick us off?
Well, one of the things I realized just as a mom is we just have so many decisions to make. And I think we don't realize how much brain space it takes to keep making those decisions. The simple question of what's for dinner can you wonder, why does that throw me into a tailspin? Why do I get so annoyed at that question when the kids ask? And it's because we're always making decisions by it. But by 5 o'clock at night, when it's like, if we haven't made a plan for dinner, we're like, and like there's just been too much in our brain going on all day. So Cheyenne and I want to come on today and talk about some of the ways to alleviate some of that decision fatigue and to pre-plan some of it out and talk about how we're going to do that and some habits and routines to set up, just because we don't want to be in that space where we feel so depleted that we can't even answer the question, what is for dinner?
Right. Yeah, ultimately, not making a decision is making a decision, and your brain loves habits. And so by planning ahead, it actually helps alleviate some of that decision fatigue and makes things so much easier because then your brain already knows what you're doing because it's a habit. You set yourself up for success, and then you have more of your mind available for all the other decisions that crop up that you can't plan for, like dealing with a problem or an emergency, or your kids make a disaster in the house somewhere, or things like that, because it allows you to have that clear mindset to deal with it in a more effective manner. But if you're always overwhelming yourself, then it's always going to feel overwhelming for sure.
I completely agree with that. And so we want to take a step back first. And so the first question I want to ask you, mamas out there, is what are the things that you feel are the hardest for you to make a decision about? Or when it comes up that it stresses you out. So I think I'd used this example before on one of the things about traveling was just one of the decisions that always seemed to be a problem for us in the car was what movie to watch. And so then it's thinking ahead, how can we pre-plan that out? And so another example might be is breakfast in the morning an issue for you guys during the weekdays? Like, is that something that like all of a sudden the kids get angry or they're just hangry or things like that happen? And so you can ask yourself, well, can we set up a routine? Like, so for instance, and again, my kids are already tired of it. So the summer is one of the things to do is to reinvent and ask them to find some recipes and maybe come up with a new schedule. But for last year, we had Mondays was oatmeal, Tuesdays and Fridays were egg days. Wednesday was waffle and Thursdays was cereal, but they just came downstairs new and they would start getting breakfast ready. I didn't necessarily have to be the one on top of necessarily starting. And they're like, and they might complain sometimes, oh, it's egg day. Can we do something, or can we do eggs in a basket or something? And that's okay. But because they at least knew what question to ask if they were tired of it. And so this summer was one of the things is on our list to do actually in the couple weeks before school starts is let's experiment with some new recipes and see, because all of a sudden my kids actually have gone to a little bit like, can we eat a little healthier? Coming from them, not even me, but they're just like, we went to State Fair last night and my daughter was just like, okay, that was good for once a year, but I can't eat like that anymore. That was coming from my 10-year-old. And she's like, can we go for a walk in the morning? Can we do these things? And so as you start to build these habits for yourself, they start to feed off of that. And so it's coming down to how can the word habit sounds like, oh, I'm going to be stuck in this pattern or I'm going to be bored with it. And I think that's where I personally had always felt like, oh, I can't do that because, oh, I like to be free of the wind and make decisions as they come up and not feel stuck in this routine, and it's going to be boring, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that boring part helps with, as Cheyenne was saying, with those instances that you can't predict. When those come up, you have the mind space to now deal and respond to it rather than just react to it. And so let's figure out what are the things that just want to have you ask that question, even write it down. What are some of the decisions or things that you feel like your kids fight over a lot? And to start with that piece, and then to work backwards. Is there something I can pre-plan to do something about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to your meal planning, that's an excellent way. It can get boring, but one way to alleviate that is to make a list. Sure, you have egg day, but how many different ways can you use the egg? Or maybe you have a greens day. One of the things that I do is I make a breakfast, and it's made mostly with greens and some coconut milk and some seasonings, and you can put eggs with it, or I often eat it without. And one thing nice about it is I can make a big batch of it and actually have it for several breakfasts or even a lunch in there because it's really versatile. And so finding ways to, maybe you make an egg bake that maybe lasts for a couple breakfasts. Um, and that's the same thing, like even with the money side of it, why planning can be so important is oftentimes what I've seen working with people is they'll decide, oh, let's go out to eat. And ultimately, it's not because they want to go out to eat, it's because they're like, I don't know what to make. So let's go out to eat because I don't feel, or they'll say, I don't feel like cooking. Well, the cooking comes from because they don't know what to make. Because when you ask the family, they're like, oh, I don't know, I'm just hungry. Well, great. We still need a meal plan. And then that pushes people to go out to eat because then if you look at it, you have a menu. So you have only a few selections to choose from, where when you're home, you know, the world is your abundance, right? And so you can make a meal decision. And instead, because you have so many decisions, you don't make a decision. It almost like you need to make your own menu so that when you say we're going to go out to eat, go to eat at your own house and pick from the menu, right? Give them a few options. And the eggs could be the same thing for breakfast. Is you give them a list of, okay, you want your eggs scrambled, fried, poached. I mean,
you name it.
Make it a sandwich. Like my son is really big into bagel sandwiches lately, and we've gotten really creative with that, and just basically leftover meat from one meal, cream cheese, and a toasted bagel. And the meat's different. We might add jalapenos in there, and we just get creative with it. But what that does is by making sure that we always have the staples for that in the fridge, then when he's hungry at 10 o'clock right before bed, he can just go make a bagel, right? But even your meals can be the same way as long as you have that meal plan or a menu. You can get versatile, get fun with it. It doesn't have to be fried eggs every time you have egg day, but it alleviates that decision. If you already know that when you go grocery shopping, you always have to make sure you have, a couple dozen eggs in the fridge to plan for that. Well, then that's already easy. Dinner can be the same thing. Oh, I'm tired of, cooking. Great. Have a sandwich, make sure you have sandwich supplies if that's your thing, or salads. Always make sure you have salads in the fridge, makings in the fridge, and get creative with it, with even your leftovers, because some of the things that most people are like, oh, I don't want that on my salad, might actually taste really good. Even like a roast, most people wouldn't think of putting roast on their salad, but how many times do you go and you can have a beef on your salad at a restaurant, or even a fish? I would have never thought of putting salmon on my salad until one time I went someplace and had one, and I was like, wow, that's really good. So just find ways to use the stuff you're already cooking and make it versatile. But yet, by having the staples on hand, it actually makes it easier because you're pre-planning, you're making those decisions ahead of time.
And so on that note, step number 2 I want to bring forth is having the kids involved in this process. And no, you can't do it the morning of asking them what they want when they're tired and they're waking up. Again, these are steps, like it takes time to integrate the kids into these processes. So it might take a whole Sunday, or if things of experimenting in the kitchen with them and getting them involved in the process of it. But planning out time to bring them involved when you have the headspace for it, and not doing it when you think, oh, they should be doing this. So for instance, what I want to say is for lunches, what we do in our house is for the elementary school, we'll print out the lunch schedule. And if they don't want the hot lunch for the day, then they're responsible for, even my 7-year-old is responsible for making their own lunch. Now, what that means is they can ask for help, but it also means that certain things are laid out in the refrigerator, and we've gone through what they need to have in their lunch. So we've gone through that they need a vegetable, that they can have a sandwich or things, but we've established that ahead of time and practice that. So in the morning, they already know what to do. And you aren't the one saying they're going, I got to make everyone's lunches. What do you want? They now take ownership and responsibility. And then my youngest will always say, Mom, can you check my lunch? And so I go over, I'm like, oh, you're missing like fruit, like let's add this to your lunch and things like that. But I'm not in charge of it, and they've taken ownership of it. But again, I can't do that in the mornings on a weekday when it's time for school. Those are things that we do, later on. We carve out time because it is going to be time consuming. Mm-hmm. But that moment of spending an hour or so going through how this works and things like that will save you hours and hours of morning of you being resentful, saying, I got to make everyone's lunch. And so you want to think ahead to what are some of these things the kids can start doing. And even the meal planning with dinner, they can start picking out recipes or things that they're capable of. Granted, this has taken a long time, but my 12-year-old, one of his geniuses is that he loves cooking and he loves being in the kitchen. So honestly, for not last week, but the last 2 weeks before that, he's actually meal planned. He found an app. I actually even looked at the computer program that he used, but he found an app. He planned out 2 weeks worth of meals, and he actually cooked dinner. And when he needed a sous chef, I was there to help him. But again, those are things that took time. I mean, there's been hours where I spent a whole Sunday afternoon just making dinner with him, right? Getting him prepped for that. And so it's knowing that if you want them ingrained in it, it's carving out the time ahead of time so that now that he's capable of making dinners, I can say, hey, go for it. And I'll be on the sidelines going, okay, do you need help cutting that? Do you need help doing this? Just to make sure the dinner is ready on time, because he doesn't necessarily have that time awareness. So looking ahead to how do we get our kids involved, but then carving out the time away from that moment of when you want it done ahead of time.
Well, and and it's amazing that you do that as well in so many other aspects, because you're building confidence in your kids. You're empowering them, because most of the time they're really looking for acknowledgement and affection from you. And when you're giving them the charge, then they're getting empowered in ways that will serve them for their entire life. But it also makes your life easier, right? Because it's kind of like potty training, right? Going through potty training is a pain in the butt, but when it's done, you're like, hallelujah. It's really the same. Like you're putting in the work now for it to pay off later. It's kind of, all that meal, planning, not going to the grocery store hungry, but having a meal plan helps you not overspend on your groceries. Having those plans so that your kids can take power of that, because a lot of times your struggles with your kids are power struggles. And so when you're giving them power like that, it's not in a bad way. It's in a blessed way, because you're actually forming them to make decisions and to problem solve, and not to get caught up in the crazy of making decisions, because you're helping them through that transition. So you're already building in such powerful habits for them to take forward into their life and then pass on to their kids, because you can be that generation to change. It doesn't have to be mom making the dinner. It doesn't have to be mom making all the meals or lunch or anything like that has been for generations, because you want them to learn how to be self-sufficient themselves. And what a better way to do that, because now you're taking your time and you're spending it with them, so they get to feel mom's love in a whole new fashion, plus all this added problem solving skills and learning how to cook and different things. And yeah, I mean, it's so beneficial. It takes the pressure off of you. It gives them the empowerment that they need. And then everybody just the whole life environment changes. It's a whole pivotal mind shift change.
Well, I love how you say it's the mind shift, because that's what I'm suggesting to you. Because for me, when we did homeschool for 1 year, but then when they were about to go back to school, I was like almost hyperventilating, because I was afraid of the mornings and I was afraid of after school, because there was always so much turmoil in it. But then when I start planning out what is going to work for us, my kids they hate checking things off, right? So we made a list of questions and things they can answer, and again, making them self-sufficient to take care of their own mornings, that it's not on me all the time. And I think that's what it comes down to. Flip it to after school. Oh my gosh, coming off the bus used to just be like horrible. And so one of the things we realized was part of it is the hangry. They eat so early in the day and we'd go to activities after school, that we just started having dinner right away. As soon as they got off the bus, dinner was ready. We could at least get 20 minutes in for a family dinner before we had to go part ways to taekwondo or swim or whatever. And that was a game changer, because it used to be, oh, let's just get a snack and pull out whatever you have when you get home. But looking at our schedule, and then it's also deciding, will we get more meals as a family, doing that for our family, or on the days where it's like right away they have to get off the bus and go somewhere, then we are using leftovers and pre-packed. Just they take dinner in the car with them in a little container from leftovers or things that we've made. So that way we're not necessarily going through the drive-thru and it's just ready. They come home, take it, and then they're off to swim or wherever they're going. And so that's worked for us. So it's finding that dynamic for you and pre-planning to what is going to solve it. And I was reading, I forgot which book it was, but she talked about just having a nice snack ready. If you guys go straight into homework and things, like having just whatever you can find in the refrigerator, some veggies, some crackers, some things just like healthier on a platter, that when they walk in, that's the first thing that they got to do. And then they're more likely to put their stuff away. And they're more likely to get to work, because again, it's routine. It's figuring out what is that missing piece that is causing everyone to be so anxious or angry. And a lot of times it's that they're hungry or that they're just tired. And so how do we make that transition just a little bit more easy and fun? And maybe it's having some music and having a little dance party with your snack before going into the homework or whatever is going to cause your family stress. And it's just, what do we do to make those transitions a little bit funner? Or how do we alleviate what is the kid going through? I mean, are they hungry? Are they just tired? Or do they just need just to downshift from a day at school? Because that is a long day before getting to homework. What do we do to make that easier?
Yeah, and sometimes, I've even learned making dinner. The boys I'm one that I get hangry too. And I realize it alleviates and helps me actually cook dinner by having a snack first. A lot of people are like, oh, I got to make dinner and that's all I'm going to eat. But even just something simple as cutting up a mango or, grabbing a banana, just something super light, just to get you by while you're making dinner. It actually makes it so you're not biting people's head off when they're actually just trying to come and help or something, right? Or getting so angry that you're messing things up because you're so starving, your brain's not even like functioning, because I'll get to that point sometimes. But yeah, that planning and everything might look different. And, going back to the habits, and how some people, habits can have a bad vibe around them. Some people think because of the routine, but you think of the value of the habit of, even getting up early and meditating or journaling and all those little habits that you can creep into your day on how much better it helps. But it doesn't mean it has to be forever. It can shift, it can change. You can take it. These habits might work now, but they may need to shift and look a little different later, and just being okay with the ebb and flow of it. You don't have to have that rigid, like this has to happen. Like routine helps for a point, but it doesn't have to stay that rigid, strict schedule. You can move it around a little bit. And, even like with your kids getting off the bus and being hungry, sometimes it's hydration, sometimes it's hungry. And so sometimes they just need a snack, and then just give them 15, 20 minutes just to go be by themselves in their own room, to be quiet, because sometimes it's just so chaotic. I've learned, and I didn't realize how stimulated some people can get until I started really looking at myself and realizing, wow, I just need time to just chill. I don't want to listen to music. I don't want to listen. I just want to be quiet. And it helps bring my energy level down to a calm level instead of being razzed up. Like, oh, I'm vibrating because I've got all this stuff to do. Grab a snack, grab a breather. And, that might even be something simple as sitting on the book with your little ones after a snack. Here's your snack. Here's a cup of water. Let's go sit on the couch and read a book or listen to calming music if you like music. But for me, I found I just like to just go chill. Just give me a few minutes to separate and breathe a little bit. And it just recollected your mind. And so that's all planning ahead. It's all getting that habit going can be so helpful on that decision fatigue.
Well, I love how you point that out. And I think part of it comes down to, it's also experimentation, because our bodies are all wired a little bit differently. We respond to things differently. Meditation staying calm might be good for one person. Getting some movement out might be good for another person. So it's listening to your own body, and then also witnessing what your kids are going through, asking them questions to what helps them, and helping them find more things that help that particular kid, because each kid is so different as well. So
Absolutely.
I think when we do that combination of like, let's try some of these things. But again, I love how you say that one routine might work now that might not work later. So I'll even give an example is, I think I'm about halfway through, is I picked 3 things I want to do for myself, which was walk first thing, do a short every day, because I was not being consistent with myself. And it wasn't even that I cared if people were watching, as I wanted to do it for myself, and then play guitar. And I will admit, the walking part, I used to like to do first thing, and it was working. And I've done it most days, and I didn't do it today, and I didn't do it yesterday because I knew I was going to be doing a lot of walking. But I was also giving myself the grace, like, you know what, today I do just need to feel calm. And I think what we're really looking for when we do it is what is helping us mentally. Because we're like, yes, we need to do these things, but is what I did in the morning help me shift my day so I'm ready to start it? And so I was like, when we get so rigid that we have to do a certain thing, that might also be limiting to us as well. So it's just being open to, am I okay to start the day? Am I going to be more responsive to what's going on around me with what I did this morning? And again, it might change a little bit. Each day might be a little bit different. And that's where the grace comes in, of allowing yourself that versatility, that yes, you have an idea of what you want to do, and you made that decision, you made that plan. But if that morning it changes just a little bit, not, and maybe the kids got up sooner, you didn't get enough time for what you want to do, but that you're flexible with it. And I think that's where we think routine has to be this way. And if I don't get this done, then I'm not okay. And so when we look at that question, and just with that flexibility, and like you said, the fluidity of it and the rhythm, is it's a dance. Like some days we'll get all of it done. And that helps us get our stuff today. And maybe the next day, time wise, we only get one thing done, but it's enough to get us started with the rest of our day.
Yeah. And it helps, a lot of people procrastinate because they don't like doing something. So you have to make sure that you're not just not doing something because you're procrastinating. So you need it to become part of a habit enough where you recognize the value of it. So say you're like, I don't feel like walking for one day. That's okay. Because you realize that, like you said, you're going to be walking a lot later in the day. You don't want it to become a habit where you're procrastinating about it, because
yes, I love that.
The value that comes out of it is way more than you sitting there. Because what happens then is, when you get in that procrastination mindset, because you don't want to make that decision and just go do it, then you're filling your brain full of the fog and the problems that come with that, going, oh my gosh, I didn't do it again today. I didn't do it again today. I didn't do it again today. Now you're filling your mind up with all those things, because now you're sabotaging your progress. And so you really have to find that balance that works for you. It's one thing to have grace, which is great, because you have to have that fluidity, because life moves, but also recognize when you're doing it because you are just being a brat to yourself, really, right? You're not serving yourself. So you have to find that balance when to recognize it. I did 75 hard, and I remember one day I was going to be doing something in the afternoon, and I was bound and determined I was going to complete 75 hard. And I literally got up at midnight, walked my 45 minutes, went back to bed for a few hours, because you can't do your second exercise for 3 hours, and got back up again late at like 4 or whatever, so I could get my walk in before I went and did my activities for the day. Was I going to be active that day? Sure. But I was determined. And that's where you have to bring that decision making into your life too, because commit to it is one thing and can really take you leaps and bounds. Yes, you want to have grace, but you also have to recognize when you're trying to sabotage your own goals, your own progress, because you're like,
I love that you're calling me out right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to do though, but the other side of it on that too is, remember, you can get back on the wagon, right?
Yeah.
So you have a couple off days, you're letting your brain make those decisions, and you're like, whatever, I throw up my hands, I'm just whatever. But remember, just because you procrastinate for a couple days or even a week, you can still get back on the wagon. It's not like it's a done forever. Just like the habit is not a done forever. It's not, the routine's not set in stone. Your habit's not set in stone. Neither is the procrastination. Neither is that poor mindset that's not helping you. Finding ways to trigger yourself to get back on the wagon and go again. It's okay.
I love that, how you put that though. And I think it comes down to, I love the word recommitment, because when we, and it's okay, because we are human, we go through our phases and stuff, and it is the recommitment to it. And as you were saying, yeah, same thing with, we both done the 75 hard, and the determination and what you do when you set your mind to it, and the capability of it is, and then after this, the post 75 hard, it's like, oh, well, I don't necessarily have that commitment. I don't necessarily need to do that. And so every time, it's funny though, because I had done so many programs before the 75 hard, and that was actually one of the ones that I committed to, and I don't even know how I finished it. And I even did the year, but as I was telling Cheyenne, day 25 of phase 3, I forgot to take my picture. I woke up at 2 a.m. in the morning and was like, I haven't taken my picture. And then that's where I came to the realization though, that, and I did take my picture at 2:30. So however people want to do it, I finished out my whole year. But it comes down to that commitment. What are you committing to yourself? Because that's where we fall short a lot of times, is when we make those decisions. We will do it for our kids. We will do it for someone else. but then what are you committing to yourself, and what do you feel good about? So like, for instance, today, like I didn't take the walk this morning, and I know I will take one later, but I really just, I had the mind space for something else I did. So I did a little bit of meditation. I did some stuff that I need to do to clear my mind at that moment. And so I think it's that balance of figuring out what do I need at that moment, but not also like, okay, if I didn't do it first thing in the morning, I'm still gonna make sure I get it done later on today. And making sure that we make that balance with ourselves and stay committed to ourselves, because
Right.
that's the first commitment that we give up when we make these decisions, is we're always like, oh, well, I don't need to do that for myself. And so
Right.
what are you committing to yourself that you want to do when you make these decisions? And that
Right.
should always be number one, but we always put it number 10th or 20th.
Right. And the other thing too is you have to recognize and remember that your children are watching how you commit to yourself. And so by not committing to yourself, you're teaching them that it's okay to put them at the bottom of the list too. So how do you want them to conduct their life in their future? What kind of example are you setting for them? Are you going to keep giving up on your commitments for them? So guess what they're going to do for everybody else around them? They are going to give up themselves for everybody else too, because you're leading by example. They are watching you a whole lot closer than you ever can imagine. And I'm very big on I'm not a do as I say, not as I do person. I want to do and show them how to do it. And staying committed with getting up early when I could have slept in, or committing to yourself, even like that where you're saying about the walk, you're like, oh, I'm going to do it later today, then make sure you get it done later today, to hold that commitment. If it's at midnight because you got home late, stay committed, because even that reprograms your mind to say you have the abundance to commit to yourself to be for you, because then you have so much more to give to everybody else.
I love that. And it's funny as you say that, because my son will actually ask me most mornings these days, did you do your short yet? Did you make your short?
Yes. They'll hold you. They're really good accountability partners when you let them in on the process, for sure. Absolutely.
And so, and actually him and I have been doing Qigong together, which is another form of movement. So I've been also just experimenting with what forms of movement do really resonate with me, because that's been my biggest struggle, is what kind of exercise do I actually want to do that I feel actually helps my body. And so I've just been exploring that question as well. And so walk is just, for me also, in my head, has always just been my standby. And so I think as we come to, and again, as we do habits and things, and if we get tired of things, it is okay to explore and find something else. Now, my goal is to make sure I move my body every day, and to make sure that it helps me feel that negative energy and flow out of me. So that's really what I'm looking for as I say I'm going to walk every day. And that's what I was missing, was that feeling of, yeah, I'm taking care of myself. And so really go back to the root of what are you asking yourself, and what is the result that you want. So for me is I want to feel like I'm moving around. I want to feel like I'm really flowing with my body, and I'm really treating it well. And so whatever that may be, whether it's doing Qigong today or whatever, just that experimentation of it, but making sure that I'm doing something that answers that question. So go to the root of it. Because sometimes when we get into those mindsets, oh, well, I didn't do it today, as Cheyenne was saying, you start beating yourself up. Well, what is the root of what you actually want to accomplish? And when you get to that root, then like, well, maybe the walking wasn't the right thing for me, but maybe it's making sure that I wake up and I do Qigong in the morning, or whatever it is for you. But really getting to that root, and it might change. Like you said, the routine is that I do movement today.
Right.
What is that movement? And that might change. So it's not, so let's make that routine for ourselves, and that decision, and give ourselves that time to make sure, is that what I want to do? And if it's not, then let me try a different movement, and making sure that I'm getting to the root of what I want that routine to be, because then the boredom won't exist, and you are still showing up for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you're feeling resistance, or you're finding yourself procrastinating, really don't be afraid to dig in and go, why? Why is this not working? Maybe, the resistance is you're doing too much of the exercise that's making your body ache. And so your mind is saying, hey, calm down a bit. We need a second, because you want to push yourself for sure, to get, build that growth. But sometimes, whether it's in business, whether it's with your kids, whether it's whatever area, if you're feeling that resistance, don't be afraid to dig in and figure out, why am I feeling that resistance? Is it because I really am not quite in the right direction I should be? Make sure that it's something that's fulfilling you and helping you with your mind body connection, because sometimes that resistance or that procrastination could be telling you maybe that's not the connection you need. Maybe that's, you have to revisit that and find something that's more suitable for your life, and be okay with that. That's okay.
So just as we're wrapping up, I just want to recap a little bit before we tell everyone how you can find us again. But again, remember that the first step is, and I think I'm going to go backwards. I know I gave different directions at the beginning, but number one is commit to yourself and find the decisions that you want to make ahead of time, that you know that you're showing up for yourself. Mm-hmm. And then number two is what we're talking about is really what decisions can help us create those habits, so we're not making more decisions throughout the day. If we need a breakfast routine, where do we see that? Asking ourselves, where do we see the struggles and the arguments happening within our family? What can we proactively do to help eliminate that and create some sort of habit with that? And again, then the step three is adjusting that habit and figuring out that why to what. Why are you doing it? So for the example of exercise for me is I want to do movement and make sure that my body is, that I'm feeling good about how I'm treating my body. And so what is that movement? It might be walking, it might be something else, but I'm exploring that, making sure that I'm doing that every day to step up for myself and be that commitment for self till I figure out then maybe I'll do something for a year and or whatever. And again, these might adjust, but what are the things that you want to commit to yourself? Ask yourself those questions. I know I just wrapped up. Cheyenne, do you want to tell everyone how they can find you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn and I do clarity calls. You feel stuck, whether it's financially or in little mindset things, we'll brainstorm and we'll figure it out through a conversation. We can figure out where are you stuck and give you some ideas on how to get unstuck or find a better path or a different one, or climbing the mountain, going around it. There's multiple ways to get around a rock, right? So sometimes it just takes another conversation. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to help. Just have a call.
And again, I'm with Connecting Mamas, and my whole passion is just to bring mamas together. And I'm realizing that it's all about inspiring genius, and in these that we're inspiring genius in ourselves and each other, and then our families. And that's what it's really about, is that connection and bring it together. And so my whole goal is to create the community where if you feel like you're doing mamahood alone, come join us, because you don't need to. And if you feel like you want to grow a little bit more, then this will be a place for you. And just find us on connectingmamas.com. And we will see you later.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone.